so far. And we've reached what is the final section of Genesis, the final story, as it were. And it's probably the most famous and well-loved story in Genesis, isn't it? It is, of course, the story of Joseph, a story we all know really well. It's a Sunday school favourite. A story that's been turned into countless films over the years. There's even a musical about it, if you're into that kind of thing. And so we've got this final section, this final story to tackle. And we know it's a new section in Genesis because of the first two verses of chapter 37. So, verse 1, Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Remember this, we call it, or it's called a toledot. You ain't got to worry about that. But it's a generation of. There are 10 of these in Genesis, and this is the 10th and final toledot. So this is the title. This is the writer's telling us this is what Jacob produced. This is what came out of the man Jacob. And it's all about his sons. And it doesn't start off well, does it? So as you can see, we've got 3 points this evening, and it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. We've got 1 grudge, 2 dreams, and 3 nightmares. 3 points. We'll learn lessons as we go, but then we've got 2 big lessons at the end. Okay, so point number 1 grudge. Here we are then in ancient Canaan, and there's a group of men shepherding their flock. These men are all brothers, but there's a problem, as we've seen a couple of weeks ago. These men are scoundrels. They're violent, they're selfish, they're full of ambition. Some of them are sexually immoral. More about that later. To put it bluntly, they are horrible men. They're horrible blokes. But there's one crown in the jewel. One jewel in the crown, sorry. One jewel in the crown. Their youngest brother is different. Verse 3, Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. There's a teenager who tags along with his half-brothers. This guy's called Joseph. But where the 10 older brothers are lazy, foul-mouthed and crooked, Joseph, it appears, is honest. And the reason is because he has a relationship with Yahweh, with the Lord. It seems that Jacob has taught Joseph about his relationship with God. Look what it says. Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now, often people will criticise Joseph, saying he was naive for grassing up his brothers or snitching on them. But Joseph is concerned about justice, isn't he? And righteousness. So when he sees evil, he reports it. So this wasn't a snivelling little kid telling tales, no. He sees what his older brothers are doing, and we already know what they're like. And he's angered by what he sees. We don't know, but maybe he says, Dad, do you realise that they don't treat the sheep very well at all? They're bad shepherds. When one sheep gets lost, they don't bother going looking for it. They don't care for the sick sheep. And Dad, they treat their servants poorly. And this ain't right. My older brothers ain't good, Father. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colours. Now, where I think we can absolve Joseph of blame, we can't really do the same for Jacob, can we? This is just an unbelievably foolish thing to do. He gives Joseph a beautiful cloak. The Hebrew phrase for this cloak isn't well understood. It can mean a coat of many colours, or it can mean a long-sleeved tunic. One translation refers to it as a richly ornamented robe. So you get the idea. Whatever it was, this thing made Joseph stand out. Jacob is making a statement about his son to the whole clan. He's saying this son is set apart. He's the special one. He's the one to whom you need to show honour and respect. Jacob's really saying this is going to be the next chief. He's going to have the birthright. Now, we've seen that Joseph, by his very nature, he's deserving of this honour. If you're going to pick one of the sons, you pick Joseph. But it's not clever of Jacob to do this, is it? And in fact, it simply exposes a huge problem in the family. Jacob loves Joseph most. Why? Well, we know he's the son of his old age, and he's the son of his old age because he's the son of Rachel. Joseph is Rachel's son. And so those old feelings of resentment and inadequacy bubble in the hearts of his other sons. Every time they see that cloak, they're reminded that their mothers played second fiddle to Rachel. And that exposes that's a wound, isn't it? Oh, he likes someone else other than our mum. Verse 4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Joseph is left out when there's a special gathering. When he walks into a tent, the other brothers just disappear. They filter away. They can't stand to look at him. They mock him behind his back. They probably make up nasty rumours about him. So here we've got a dysfunctional family. We've got a family where the tensions are high, where the passions run deep. This household is like a tinderbox that's ready to ignite. There are grudges, there are deep wounds. What is the spark going to be that ignites the whole thing? Well, second point, 2 dreams. Verse 5, now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. It was bad enough when Dad told everyone that you were special, but now you're telling everyone you're special. And that's not good at all, is it, Joseph? What are you playing at? And here's the first dream. We all know it very well, don't we? Verse 6. Hear this dream I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding 7 sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered round it and bowed down to my sheaf. Well, that's an odd dream, isn't it? Because these men are shepherds. They deal with sheep, not wheat. So the brothers are thinking, why is wheat involved in this? Well, obviously we know this is a prophecy for the future, don't we? The brothers would one day approach Joseph looking for wheat. They would bow down to him because of the power of his food supply. But his brothers aren't happy about the ramifications of this dream. Verse 8, his brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Bad enough that you had a dream, why couldn't you just keep it to yourself? Dream number 2 takes things up a notch, though, doesn't it? Verse 9, behold, I had another dream, says Joseph. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. We've gone from wheat, the terrestrial, to stars and the planets, the celestial, the heavens. So Joseph's saying, now I've got spiritual confirmation of my earlier prediction. And this is a second dream, it's a second confirmation, it's a witness. And now even Jacob is a little bit taken aback by this declaration. I mean, this sounds ludicrous. Verse 10, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you've dreamed? Shall I and your mother, I think he means Leah, shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him. But his father kept this saying in mind. We're reminded of Mary, who kept the events of Jesus' early childhood in mind, aren't we? So I think this sounds weird, but Jacob's keeping it at the back of his mind. That's interesting, that's odd. Notice though, before we go on, that in these opening 11 verses, there's a theme that the narrator wants us to spot. He keeps drawing on the idea of seeing and hearing. So his brothers' hatred grows from what they see and what they hear. So verse 4, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Verse 5, now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Verse 6, he said to them, hear this dream that I've dreamed. And end of verse 8, they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. This shows us that the seeds of hatred aren't usually sown because of someone's bad actions. Human beings take a dislike to each other because of what they see and hear from other people. So take racism, for example. Why are people racist? Well, it starts off with what they see, doesn't it? Well, there's a person and they look different to me. And maybe they act a bit different to me. They've got a different culture. And it starts off with the eyes. Notice Joseph hasn't physically done anything to hurt or injure his older brothers, but they don't like the look of him. The sight of him is enough to boil their blood, and they dislike what he has to say. Again, he doesn't physically lay a finger on them, he doesn't nick anything from them, he doesn't hit them, he doesn't badmouth them. They just hate the words he has to say. And okay, you could have the old debate about whether or not Joseph is wise to share his dreams, couldn't you? But think, wouldn't you? I mean, we share our weird dreams all the time, don't we? Kate is always waking me up and she's telling me she's had a dream that I've had an affair. And she says, oh, it was horrible. Oh, I was so upset. I say, who was it with? I was with a dolphin or something. Is it really worth hating someone over their dreams? Is it really worth hating someone over the things that they say? Well, beware of that, Christian friend. The devil wants to roll you up. How often does Satan get Christians to fall out with one another over social media posts? How often do we get frustrated at church because of the things we've seen other people do? Well, I mean, I saw Clive drop his Bible, he didn't even pick it up. The other day he picked his nose and then shook Bob's hand. He didn't do anything to me personally, but I saw what he did. But he didn't hurt you, did he? It's amazing how petty we are. How readily we're willing to let sin crouch at the door. Okay, 1 grudge, 2 dreams. Thirdly, 3 nightmares. The first nightmare is a nightmare for Joseph, there is. A nightmare for Joseph. And we know this story well, don't we? Verses 12 to 17, Jacob sends him on a mission. Go and see how your brothers are getting on. Where are they last seen? Well, they were further up north near the town of Shechem. Oh dear, that isn't good, is it? Why isn't that good? What happened at Shechem?
That's where the problem was with Simeon and...
Yeah, Levi and Simeon, they massacred the Shechemites. They massacred the whole town. We're being reminded of what these individuals are like. I remember Shechem, remember what happened there a few chapters back. And I imagine Joseph gets to Shechem, and the city's now a ghost town, isn't it? It's just burnt remains of where houses used to be. He meets a man who tells him that the brothers have moved on to a place called Dothan. Dothan is even further north, and it's out towards the coast. So, now it's time for the map. Here's the route Joseph probably would have taken. So it's all mountains there, so we've got down into the Jordan Valley, up to Shechem. He gets to Shechem. They're not there, so he goes up to Dothan. Hopefully you can see that. Now the problem with Dothan, which will come into play later, is you see all those little towns, Aruna, Migdal, Yeham, Soka, Aphek, that they are on something called the International Coastal Highway. And so these towns were on the trading route, and what people would do is they would produce stuff in the Jordan Valley, and then they want to sell it. So they'd go over the hills and they would sell it to traders who would then go down this route all the way down to Egypt. And look how close Dothan is to that. As we know, that's going to come into play later. Notice as well, though, maybe a famine is already on the cards. They have had to travel a long way from their home so that their sheep can find good grass. They're now 50 miles away from Mamre, they're down in Hebron. So they've had to travel 50 miles to find decent pasture for their sheep. So there's trouble on the horizon. Verse 18 though, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. There they see little Joseph coming up the hill, and maybe they see the sequins on his coat glistening in the sun. And contrast these brothers with what we saw with Esau back in chapter 33. Remember, Esau saw his brother from afar off, and he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. Well, Jacob's oldest boys are not following in the footsteps of Esau, are they? They've all become Cains. He's got 9 Cains on his hands. The majority of them have murderous intent. Not only that, but they already know how they're going to get away with it. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Verse 20, come now, let us kill him and throw him in one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. They're deceivers, aren't they? Like father, like son. Jacob is the deceiver. So the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. Verse 21, but when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. And Reuben's plan, we find out, is to go back later and rescue Joseph. So he says, look, we don't kill him, don't shed his blood. We can simply let nature take its course. We'll leave him here and he'll die of exposure. Why kill him quickly when we can make him suffer a bit? And that convinces the mob, doesn't it? And we must ask ourselves, why is Reuben the one who intends to show mercy to Joseph? What sets him apart? Well, Reuben, it turns out, has got a guilty conscience. And he's also got a bad reputation. So flick back quickly to Genesis 35. We missed Genesis 35 and 36 for various reasons. But Genesis 35, look at verse 22. While Jacob lived in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. I told you these men were rotten. Reuben, the oldest son, maybe he's in his early 20s, he's feeling a bit amorous. Well, he forces his mother-in-law into bed with him. Remember, Bilhah is a slave. She's a concubine. So the oldest son of the real wife thinks that he can push her around. And sleeping with his father's concubine, well, he's staking a claim as the chief, isn't he? Absalom does something similar when he usurps the throne from his father, King David. Reuben is a snatcher. He's trying to snatch his father's position. And now he's snatched one of his concubines. Like father, like son. So we're not sure, but back in chapter 37 then, Reuben thinks, well, I've got to get back into my dad's good books. I've been publicly shamed, publicly exposed. So what I'll do, I'll be the one to restore his favourite son. Reuben doesn't try and rescue Joseph because he loves Joseph. He's doing it for political advantage, but it works. So look back at chapter 37 and verse 23. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe with many colours that he wore. Now in the Hebrew, there's a violent undertone baked into this word stripped. They tear this coat off of him, and they injure Joseph in the process. This garment incorporates everything they hate about the youth. And I imagine they throw it on the ground in disgust, maybe they stamp on it a few times. And in verse 24, they throw Joseph in the pit. Now these pits were probably dug to catch rainwater so that people and animals could drink out of them. They were cisterns. But look, the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Joseph's nightmare has begun. But notice, we're told Joseph doesn't say anything. He's silent. He's like a lamb led to the slaughter, isn't he? And he's in that pit with no water. He's thirsty. He's hungry. And verse 25, to add insult to injury, his brothers sit down and have a feast. No doubt the smell of their food wafted into the pit. A nice roast lamb they were having. Perhaps Joseph did cry out for mercy, we don't know, but whatever, they don't respond. They callously let him suffer in the pit. And see the irony in this story, right? Years later, Joseph would be eating and living like a king in Egypt as they slowly starved to death in Canaan. But looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Who were the Ishmaelites? Descendants of Ishmael. Who's Ishmael? Who? Yes, he was. Everyone's speaking of it. That's great. I'm glad you noticed it. He was the nasty older brother of Isaac, wasn't he? So again, we're being warned. This cannot be good. Here's some other bad older brothers. The Ishmaelites, as I said, they're on their way down to the international coastal highway. And so Joseph is sold off into slavery by his own brothers, his own flesh and blood. Judah actually says that. And remember, he's not sold as a prince, he's not a top ticket item, just 20 pieces of silver. This is the going rate for a slave. Verse 28, so the brothers drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. Second nightmare is Reuben's nightmare. He's been away during the sale of Joseph. We don't know where, but when he gets back, he's distraught. Verse 29, here's some more irony. What does he do? He tears his clothes. He'd been so envious of Joseph's coat, well, now his heart sinks. And he realises, it's just a boy. And it's just a robe. Why was I so angry about a robe? Verse 30, he returned to his brother and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? What's going to happen to me? What's going to become of me? I was meant to be the saviour. I was meant to be the hero. I was meant to come out of this looking good. But now all he knows is even more of a villain. He's a villain because he's the oldest. He should have been the one to protect Joseph. he should have had the guts at the very start to say, no, we're not going to lay a finger on him. But instead, he tried to con everyone, hadn't he? I can twist this to suit my agenda. I can move things so that I come out looking good. But now it's too late to do the right thing. And in ripping his clothes, Reuben is culturally telling us and himself that Joseph is dead. Verse 31, then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. Remember way back when Jacob was a young man, he and his mother had killed a young goat to con their father, hadn't they? To con his father. Remember, he cooked a goat so he could give the meat, the meal to Isaac, pretending he was Esau, and he'd taken the goat's skin and put it on his arm so that he felt hairy. Well, now his sons kill a goat to deceive him. Which brings us to our third and final nightmare. It's a nightmare for Jacob. And his boys are very cunning, aren't they? They don't rush home making a big fuss. No, they send the blood-soaked robe ahead of them with a servant, with a message. Yeah, we found this. Can you identify if it's Joseph? I mean, we barely even noticed he had a special coat, but this looks familiar. Is it Joseph's? And they leave Jacob to invent his own explanation, don't they? Verse 33, he identified it and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. There's no doubt about it. Jacob says he's dead. And look, poor Jacob, like any parent who loses a child, he is inconsolable. Verse 34, he tore his garments, he put on sackcloth on his loins, he mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol, to my grave, to my son, mourning. for the rest of my life, I will be miserable because I've lost my boy and I'm never going to get over it. Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guards. It's amazing storytelling, isn't it? I love this story. Okay, 3 points done. 2 simple lessons to close in. Lesson number 1 is obvious, but it's still very hard to learn, and it's this: misery is stitched into the fabric of redemption. Misery is stitched into the fabric of redemption. We're told at the very end of the book why this is allowed to happen, aren't we? So turn to chapter 50 and listen to what Joseph says 39 years later to his brothers. 39 years later. Genesis 50 and verse 19. They think that once their dad Jacob has died, they're now in Egypt, they think that Joseph is going to get his revenge on them finally. He didn't kill them because it would upset his dad, and now Jacob's dead, they think we're done for. Chapter 50, verse 19, Joseph says this to his brothers: "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? I'll let God judge you for what he's done. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Notice, Joseph doesn't say that God had to undo the wicked work that his brothers did. That's sometimes what we think, isn't it? We see God as a chess player. So wicked people are tempted by Satan to do wicked things, so they move the knight over there maybe. But God's so good at chess, he can move a rook and a castle and counter Satan. And he undoes Satan's bad work. But that's not how it works. Joseph's brothers had evil intent. They wanted to destroy Joseph. So God used their wickedness for his good. In fact, think about it. The sale of Joseph activates the dreams his brothers were trying to stop. We'll kill him, they say, and that will stop his dreams. We'll see what happens to his dreams once he's dead. And so God says, well, I'll use your desire to get rid of him to fulfill this prophecy. In fact, your wickedness is stitched in to the prophecy. Should you see the point? But what about us? Well, the last thing I want us to do tonight is go home thinking that this story is about us. That's what a lot of people do to the Bible, isn't it? They make the Bible about them. They've got main character syndrome. So whatever Bible story I'm reading, I'm the main character. So I'm going to put myself in the position of the hero. So in this story, I'm innocent Joseph. I'm the good egg, I'm the good son. Don't do that. That's not the point of this story. However, I think we can still rightly learn from Joseph to trust and have patience in the Lord. Remember, we know the end of this story, don't we? We know the happy ending. But think about Joseph. At no point in this nightmare does he know that he's going to wake up. And he has to suffer in order for prophecy to be fulfilled. Well, the New Testament tells us the same thing, doesn't it? Matthew 16, verse 24, Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." Jesus is telling us misery and pain is stitched into the fabric of our redemption. God has provided the vision, the dream, the promise. The promise is eternal life. It's a new heaven, a new earth. It's the promised land. But in order to get there, first we've all got to endure Egypt. We've all got to experience the injustice and the sorrow and the pain and the tribulation of this world. First the cross, then the crown. So I don't know how your life is going at present. Perhaps Your life feels like a living nightmare. Perhaps you feel lonely, betrayed, hurt. Well, understand that your pain is included in God's plan for you. He's stitched it in to your story. He's not trying to undo a mess. No, he's engineered the mess. He's stitched it into your life story, and he's done it for your good. And he's done it knowing that one day you will be exalted. Very literally, you'll be exalted in a new creation with Jesus Christ as your King. Okay, final lesson then, and again it's very obvious but very necessary to say, this story isn't about us. Who's it really about? Well, here you can give the Sunday school answer, can't you? It's about Jesus. The Joseph story is the Jesus story. I don't know if you spotted the little hints that I gave in the sermon during the narrative. Let's see if we can thread them all together. Joseph, I suppose we can call him the first king of Israel, can't we? Everything we see of Joseph the first points to Jesus the first and the last. So Joseph is Israel's finest son. He's the son about which his father says, this guy is set apart. The rest of you are rubbish and horrible, but he's my beloved. The father adores him. The father favours him. The father blesses him. Joseph is hated, isn't he, because of what he says to his brothers. He tells them of his and their future, and they despise him for it. Well, when King Jesus turns up, what do the political elite want to do? Well, they want to kill him, not for stuff he does, but for things that he says. It's because of his teaching. What does this man mean he can forgive sins? What does he mean he'll raise up the temple on the third day? Joseph, like Jesus, is the king taken by his rotten brothers and stripped naked, robbed of his glory, beaten, abused, spat on. And he goes silently like a lamb to the slaughter. He goes to the cross where he's humiliated, he's thirsty, he's in agony. And he's sold not as a prince, not as a high-ticket item, but for the price of a slave. Betrayed by his brothers with a kiss. And when Joseph metaphorically dies, well, the last king actually dies, doesn't he? Lowered into that cold, empty tomb. The innocent one whose blood is then presented to the Father. But why? Why does Jesus have to go through all of the humiliation and all of the suffering? Well, it's so that the king, Joseph, might save his brothers from starvation, isn't it? Joseph's journey results in the salvation of his family and blessing to the whole of the ancient world. And likewise, Jesus suffered the pain and endured the cross so that he might save rotten brothers and sisters like us. Joseph would eventually sit on the throne of Egypt at the right hand of Pharaoh, and all would bow before him. But the final king of Israel would go 1,000 steps better. He is currently seated at the right hand of God, far above all authority, all principalities and all power. And he's been given a name that is far above every other name. And at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that he is Lord and Saviour and God. The Joseph story is the Jesus story.